And now I'm going to introduce the session 9. I'm going to pass the floor to Galen Lamphere-Englund, who will be moderating this section called Disrupting Pathway into the Manosphere. Galen is a senior advisor with over 15 years of experience at the intersection of counterterrorism, violence prevention, and technology. A team lead at the Christchurch Foundation and founder of the Extremism and Gaming Research Network, Galen focuses on building safer digital ecosystem and combating online violent extremist intersection with violent misogyny and TFGBV. Galen, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Victoria, thank you so much for the kind invitation, and a huge thanks to you and FPA for putting on an outstanding event and symposium this year. I'm really pleased to be joined by a phenomenal panel of speakers who I'll introduce in just a moment and pass the floor over to them. But I wanted to give a bit of a framing at the top, given we're talking about disrupting pathways into the manosphere. Core to this idea is that of the manosphere. Fundamentally, I've spent most of my professional career working in conflict zones and trying to understand better ways to prevent societal cycles of violence. And the one through line that repeats over and over again, especially when looking at violent extremist organizations and individuals motivated by extremist ideologies, is that of misogyny. We know that support for misogyny increases vulnerability to violent extremism. We see men and boys who support misogynistic ends are up to 3 times as likely to support other types of violent extremism. And we see that true in studies across the world, from the UK to ones I've worked on in Indonesia, Bangladesh, the Philippines, Libya. And we also see that violent extremism, when linked to misogyny, can form a form of terrorist attack in and of itself. Recent work that a colleague, Communia, has worked on showed that about 40% of terrorist manifestos over the last 40 years cited misogyny as either the primary motivator for the attack or a significant secondary motivator for the attack. Funny enough, violence against one group tends to inspire violence against many others. And when we expand out the aperture a bit broader, we see that the types of online, incredibly powerful social ecosystems that we just heard about, both from gaming to AI, and the types of misogynistic harms around those, can begin to manifest into other forms of offline harms. For example, when we look at a slightly broader picture, mass shootings in the US, which are not typically coded by gendered attacks or not, when we begin to examine them, we find that 35 to 45% of those shootings are linked to grievances against women. When we go into the background of profiles of attackers, we often find substantial immersion in online communities of hyper-misogynistic or ultra-gore content, and often both at the same time. So what we see is the ability and the necessity to begin to intervene earlier on in these pathways into hyper-misogynistic spaces and into the broader manosphere. Today, I'd like to ask you all in the room, what comes to mind when you hear the phrase, the manosphere? It's in media everywhere at the moment. I'm genuinely curious, the first word that comes to your mind with that term. I know we have a lot of experts on today's calls and researchers, but let's get a few ones inside of their Adolescence TV series. Yes, Adolescence has done a huge amount to draw attention to this. There's a few details in Adolescence that I disagree with. There's a few others I know, but overall, it's drawn a lot of attention to this issue set. Red pilling, drawing down the red pill zone, entertain hate, this broader atmosphere of influencers, broader ways in which tech platforms help to proliferate and fuel misogynistic attitudes in online spaces, racism, inceldom. Yes, all of these are elements of what tend to constitute manosphere content. And it converged from the more mundane but toxic looks maxing, for example. My colleague and I have been documenting looks maxing simulations on Roblox for children, to sexual violence simulation games, to intense direct recreations of violent acts of gender-motivated shootings such as Toronto Tech or Del Isla, and far beyond that as well. So when we begin to think about this, we want to look at what are the ways in which we can intervene, what are the ways in which we can better protect, what are the ways in which we can better ensure that our digital environments are places where we can all thrive. So the work that I've tried to do for years focuses on violent extremism and targeted hate and harassment fundamentally has a core relationship with violent misogyny and technologically facilitated gender-based violence. At the Christchurch Call Foundation, we're now running a project called Catalyst across 4 countries with a really wonderful network of partners trying to identify these pathways into violent misogyny and trying to intervene in them across prevention, mitigation, and policy tools. I'm really glad to see quite a few folks here who are along with us on that journey. But I'd be remiss if I didn't turn the floor over to the fantastic panel that's here with me today. And we also recognize that misogyny takes on different forms in different corners of the world, and the manosphere looks differently and engages differently across parts of the world, but it tends to be interconnected. Here to take us through a piece of that will be Sarah Kaddoura. Sarah, you are a Palestinian feminist researcher pursuing your PhD in Complutense at the University of Madrid. You manage the political educations program at South Feminist Futures and create incredible video content on contemporary feminist issues and histories in the Global South on your YouTube channel. You're also the author of a really wonderful report on the Manosphere in Arabic that I highly recommend to anyone interested in this work. Sarah, I know you're going to take us through a bit of how the Manosphere evolves across Arabic-speaking digital spaces, and I can't wait to hear more. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Galen, and I'm really happy to be sharing the space with you and the other wonderful panelists. And thank you for this also very solid framing. I'm gonna share my screen. Let me know if all goes well. Can you see my screen?
Perfect. Yep.
All right. So as Galen has already mentioned, my name is Sarah. I'm currently based in Madrid, but I've lived my entire life in Lebanon, and I've been researching the Manosphere in Arabic-speaking context, particularly, the Swana region, and in particular in Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt, and similar contexts due to, first of all, it's linguistically better for me and easier for me to track that content due to dialect, but also some of the most famous Manosphere content creators in the Arab world have been from the region, though I have to point out Morocco is actually the country with the most engagement through research with Manosphere content. And to just give an overview of what I will go over quickly, I'll go over what this Arabic-speaking Manosphere looks like. So how it overlaps with English and other language speaking manospheres or Western manospheres, and what the main features are, and the running narratives, as well as some of the manifestations or the impact that we can see of it offline, or at least that is facilitated or maybe accelerated due to the content. I do want to point out that when we use the Manosphere today, it has very negative connotations, but it does explain, or it does it's just the naming for the sphere or the corners of the internet that are inhabited mainly by men and that are concerned with men's issues, as they say. So that could be, a positive sphere. That could be a positive sphere in a positive space. That could include content that is, not necessarily misogynist, or, red pill or incel or other. It could be a good space and a good community, but for the most part, at the moment, the manifestations we see are very, very bad and very violent and very misogynist. I want to mention the three main features, because when we speak about the manosphere, one of the most I guess common comments that I get, especially from Swana region, is how does this differ from your old school misogyny? If we have very systemic discrimination in place, if the laws already in most of the regions I mentioned, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, Syria, Egypt, etc., are already discriminatory against women, already do not apply CEDAW, already do not have any sort of a progressive equality economically, politically, socially, etc. How is this different when we have something so structural that clearly favors men in general through law and practice? I would just refer to these three main features, and the first one is the main difference, I would say, discursively comes from how this misogyny is framed and repackaged as a solution to today's social, economic, and political ailings or failings of today's society. It's looking at the trouble and the struggles that a lot of people have today, whether it's economic precarity and anxiety, unemployment, political instability, surveillance, loneliness, etc. A lot of problems that are experienced by huge chunks of society, not just by men, but it repackages those problems and frames them as a problem that is particularly man-related, and even though they are, social and collective issues, this manosphere or the content of the manosphere usually brings or kind of proposes a regimen to an extent that individualizes these problems and makes them the issue of the individual man in this instance. So they rely a lot on self-help. They rely a lot on improving yourself and your circumstances within the system, hacking the system, gamifying the system to an extent. And that is really a treating of a social problem and a structural problem that a lot of people are experiencing as an individual problem that requires individual solutions. The second feature, I would say, is the very core role of technology. And I'm talking about, social media platforms and the regulations that they have, the loosening of regulations in many aspects when it comes to misinformation, disinformation, when it comes to, as mentioned in the previous session, AI manipulation, amplifying of rage bait content and kind of swarming you with specific kinds of content all the time that is just meant to put you on the edge. Whether it's also content moderation, different modes of surveillance, and an encouraging of surveillance among people as well. And that also means that content that comes from the manosphere, which relies heavily on rage bait, relies heavily on misinformation, disinformation, and relies heavily on, AI manipulation and all these aspects, it becomes very inescapable. And it becomes very hard for young men specifically, or anyone who uses the internet and, is interested in content that is usually framed as, male specific content, like, I don't know, gaming, like using, looking for headphones, looking for a gaming set, looking for gym information, looking for whatever. It kind of takes you into a loop in which this content invites other content, and eventually you find yourself swarmed with, red pill or other manosphere content that is, based ideologically on misogyny. And the last feature I wanted to mention is monetization and funding. The manosphere and a lot of these influencers and figures in the manosphere rely heavily also on promoting their regimens, on promoting their coaching sessions, consultations, etc., to kind of help these young men become successful. Everyone wants to become a millionaire or a billionaire. This mentality of thinking you are closer to becoming a millionaire than to becoming, someone unhoused or unemployed, etc. It relies on that, and it ends up being a self-fulfilling prophecy for the influencers who make their money through the monetization of these sessions and these lessons and the academies or whatever they are selling. One of the most famous red pill content creators from Jordan also sells, what's it called? Testosterone formulas, and the way they are framed is, not just something like an organic formula for you, it's also a reclaiming of manhood. So it's a very fascinating thing. And in the Arab world or in Arabic-speaking context, it is super influenced by the manosphere globally. It's sometimes hard to separate because of the consumption culture that becomes so easily through the internet. So the same influencers or fathers of the manosphere in the West, whether Jordan Peterson, Rollo Thomasy, all these different people, regardless of their backgrounds and what kind of expertise they hold, they are translated constantly. Their material and ideas are made available in Arabic, and they are shared and amplified on Arabic-speaking platforms. They share the same vocabulary that is, rooted in neoliberal ideas of value, your value as a person, being related to your value as a provider, or your value as someone who is fulfilling your gender roles to the max. And what that means in terms of a sexual marketplace, everything is seen literally as a game in which these manosphere influencers try to help you hack around to reach success that relies on a lot of hyper individualism. So that is also the same in our context. What we utilize locally in the manosphere is usually the using of a specific local Arabic language that is also rooted in misogyny. It's the weaponization of specific traditions and the weaponization of local cultural and religious beliefs. So kind of adding a Muslim aspect to some of the content, or adding a Christian aspect to other, maybe Orthodox Christian or whatever local, religion is more prominent in a certain place. So it's just, they add more sayings, more verses, more, I guess, not sure about the English word, but they kind of localize it in that sense to make it seem like something that comes from, our lived reality. But in reality, it's a fascinating thing that creates a contradiction, because they're instrumentalizing specific fears from Western contexts about gender and bathrooms and a lot of I would say moral panics that do not have a root in our region are utilized in amplifying the discourse of the manosphere in the Arab world. But at the same time, they frame, any feminist presence or existence or organizing in the region as Western, or as an import and a westernized section, even though it's literally a Western discourse that is being pulled through the manosphere. And I would say I'm not sure how am I on time.
We're over, I'm afraid. If we could wrap up with next speakers.
Yeah. I will wrap up and leave the rest for questions. So yeah, I would say it's a very important thing that needs much more research and much more work in terms of policy, because we are already seeing its impact not just online. Online already it's a very harmful thing, because the being exposed to this kind of content all the time skews your ideas of the world and skews how you approach your relationship with other genders and how you just carry on with your life. But we're also seeing how that inspired some crimes and killing of young women, how it also inspired the rise of militant groups that attack LGBTQ people in Lebanon, or that attack women's rights organizations, etc. So the impact of it is, it cannot just be relegated to old school misogyny. There's more work to do. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Really, really interesting presentation and incredible research that you're doing. And I think we'd be remiss on your last point not also to recognize Yael Mohammed, who was assassinated in Baghdad last week as well, who was an incredible activist in the broader space, especially in the Iraqi and Iranian context. So all of what happens in these online spaces does spill into very real world, tangible violence, as you say. I think I really like the way that you pull out the selective westernization, where you see intensive westernization of many of these manosphere narratives among their advocates. But as soon as there's something pressing against it, there's immediately this counterlash of anything that is human rights based, anything that is feminist must obviously be from the West. So there's this selective blindness that often comes into play. So really wonderful piece. Thank you very much. We'll have more conversation in our questions. I want to introduce our next speaker, Abideen Olasupo. Abideen will be joining us to present on a really incredible initiative called HerSafeSpace. Abideen, you are the founder and global director of Brain Builders Youth Development Initiative, and your work focuses on how online ecosystems shape harmful masculinities and pathways into radicalization, as well as to advance holistic strategies that challenge gender-based violence in digital spaces. Abideen, I'm really excited to see what you have to tell us, and we've had a bit of look through HerSafeSpace. It's a great project. I can't wait to hear more. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Galen, and I sincerely want to thank Sarah as well for setting the ground running, especially from the Arab region. Abideen is my name. I'm the co-founder of HerSafeSpace, and I work with the Brain Builders Development Initiative. I want to especially thank the UNFPA team for recognizing our initiative and bringing us on board. When we began working on technology-facilitated gender-based violence across West Africa, one pattern became very clear to us. And it is the fact that digital abuse is not just a technology problem. It is a masculinity problem as well. In Nigeria, Ghana, Cameroon, Benin, and Togo, West and Central African parts of the continent, online abuse reflects offline patriarchal power structures. Young men are increasingly exposed to misogynic online influences, peer-driven harassment culture, image-based abuse, normalization, and digital sexual entitlement narrative. Let me expand the scope. From our engagement and interaction, we discovered that many boys are learning that dominance equals masculinity. We also learned that they are learning that sharing intimate images is just a joke. And they are also learning that humiliation is just a mere entertainment. And silence from good men reinforces this culture. So if we only support survivors without engaging the ecosystem that produces the perpetrators, then we are managing harm and not preventing it. So this is why HerSafeSpace integrates two strategies. One, the response. The response is to build an AI-powered chatbot called Kemi for survivors of technology-facilitated gender-based violence. This chatbot was co-created with survivors, and it offers confidential and survivor-centered support. Secondly, as well, prevention. We have the male allyship program that addresses the upstream norm that drives digital harm. So this is not about positioning men as survivors or saviors. It is about recognizing that prevention must include those who are socialized into harmful norms. If we do not intervene in how boys learn masculinity online, then digital harm will scale faster than digital safety. That's the this is an integral part of this larger part of last year to do. The male allyship, I will take you on through how it works. The male allyship program was launched across 5 countries, like I said earlier, Nigeria, Ghana, Togo, Benin, and Cameroon. I will mobilize 247 to 300 men across these continents. Recruitment was done through open applications. We did nominations as well to ensure that both accessibility and community legitimacy. Then participants include youth leaders, community chiefs, advocates, influencers, traditional and religious leaders who hold, the power across West and Central African countries. So each ally signed a commitment form with us. This mattered to us because public commitment changes social signaling. It shifts the narrative from GBV is just a woman business to GBV prevention is collective responsibility. So our engagement with them include inauguration and public accountability sessions, peer-to-peer learning, advocacy workshops, platform-based amplification of the digital messages, promotion of even the chatbots, having women-led spaces, and emphasizing the messaging, which is extremely important of the HerSafeSpace. So through our implementation, several tactics are proven particularly effective in offering alternative to misogynistic narrative. First, replace, don't just condemn. Attacking misogynistic influencers directly often triggers defensiveness. Instead, we offer alternative masculinity models, confident without control, strong without dominance, protective of dignity rather than reputation. Second one, peer-led messaging. Young men respond more openly to other men. When allies share personal reflections, moments they unlearn entitlement or challenge harmful peer behavior, it resonates faster with them more than formal lecture. Then the third one, we did the digital bystander tool. What we did by this is we equipped our allies with practical scripts. Scripts like, let's not share that. This could destroy someone's life. Consent does not disappear online. The fourth one we did was to shift the status incentive. We believe that online misogyny often breeds attention and validation. We work to reframe social capital around responsible digital behavior and feasible accountability. Then the fifth one has to do with engaging the cultural gatekeepers. In West Africa, religious leaders, chiefs, and community elders shape moral legitimacy. So we engaging them reduces a lot of backlashes and make the allyship socially acceptable. There's one important insight that I want us to take note from this. Many young men are not committed misogynists. They are conflicted. They are navigating peer pressure and digital influence. So when conversations are reflective rather than accusatory, openness increases significantly as far as we are concerned for what we have seen in the feed. Then, for our learning and lessons and resistance and way forward, engaging men, let's be realistic, engaging men is not without resistance. We encounter defensive reactions such as, men are victims too. That, this is even exaggerated, or moralized control narrative frame as protection. So we navigated this by acknowledging complexity without diluting the disproportionate harm women and girls faces. So there is also a peer backlash where some allies report being mocked and labeled being weak. The allies we are using, they are male across different social strata. So when they're carrying out this, they are being mocked that, they are the weak counterpart. That's where they are being used as male allies to counter online harm or TFGBV. So we also encounter this we counter this narrative by building solidarity networks and normalizing backlash as part of norm change. We also counter structural Zionism, which is a belief that justice systems are weak. So how are we intervening in this? So in response, we link the conversation to practical tools like HerSafeSpace chatbots, Kemi, and local referral pathways. This way, action reduces cynism. Now, there's one honest reflection I need to share with us. The program is currently strongest in mobilization. The next phase that we are looking at is to deepen measurable transformation, which means that we are trying to introduce structured gender transformative curriculum, adding pre and post attitude measurement as well to this male allyship, and tracking real behavioral intervention. Because we believe that institutionalizing this male ally network within schools, faith institutions, and youth structures is really a way to go based on what we have seen work in the field. So thank you so much for the opportunity to make this presentation and share about the work that we are doing. Thank you.
Abideen, thank you so very much for the work that you're doing and for a really, really fascinating presentation. A lot of points that resonate there, both on trying to find more positive narratives, not just condemning narratives, trying to find ways to draw on peer-led messaging and bringing in culture to our conversations. And fundamentally, I think a lot of this speaks to a thread that Sarah was also pulling on, which is that frequently in these spaces, you have young men and boys looking for meaning, looking for purpose, looking for knowledge and information, and often getting red-pilled into really negative spaces. But the fundamental drive to find meaning, purpose, and belonging are ones that shouldn't be fought. Rather, how can we provide more positive alternatives and shift other folks and equip them with better tools to upstand in digital spaces? So thank you. Really, really great conversation. I can't wait to get into questions in just a moment here, because I've got a whole list of them that I want to fire off for you. But before we get into our Q&A time, we have our third wonderful speaker for today, Olivia DeRamus. Olivia, you are an entrepreneur and women's ethical tech advocate. Currently, you serve as the founder and CEO of Communia, a healthy social network for women and non-binary folk. You are a survivor and have dedicated your career to prioritizing social safety, both in your company and as a broader challenge to the tech industry. I like your modalities of disruption here, and I'm very excited to hear what you're working on these days. Olivia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Galen, and I'm really excited to be here with everyone. Let me just share my screen and get officially set up here. Can you see what I'm looking at?
You're good.
Okay, fabulous. All right. So today is the first time I'm going to be sharing publicly about the emotional safety algorithm we've been working on at Communia over the last couple of months. And I want to start off with a statement that is very uncomfortable for most people in the tech industry. And that's that social media platforms are algorithmically engineering misogyny and extremism. Traditional feeds are chaotic, they're optimized for engagement at all costs, and they're isolating. Social media algorithms exploit emotions and amplify divisive content. 83% of Gen Z men and boys saw an increase in negative content, such as violent, explicit, fake, extremist, and misogynistic in 2025 alone. And 43% of Gen Z men and boys say that social media makes them more lonely. Those two statistics are from a large-scale study Communia recently completed. Current algorithms erode emotional safety, which weakens belonging and well-being and increases susceptibility to extremism. Studies reflect this, like this one. A peer-reviewed ML study of over 11,000 adolescents found that a lack of well-being and belonging, not ideology, are the strongest predictors of extremism risk. Now, we've been over this already with some other fabulous speakers. So just to touch very briefly, the more exposure a new social media user, especially a young man, receives to misogynistic and extreme content, the more they are likely to create that content, thus installing a self-fulfilling, algorithmically driven cycle. Ultimately, mainstream social media apps think that emotionally vulnerable users are more likely to purchase and monetize. So they encourage this with user experience strategies like the injection. When a user is emotionally stable, they will try to surprise them with shock value content and emotionally dysregulating content to try to drag them into the downward cycle. When a user is emotionally dysregulated, these algorithms will try to keep them dysregulated, serving them increasing content on the same subject of larger extremes, one after the other. Then they round these strategies up with the re-engagement suggestion. What you see on our screens here is a real screenshot I just noticed earlier this week from my personal social media use. And it's something that happens a lot. And it's an algorithmic element that you might not fully be able to appreciate if you're not kind of in this. And so social media platforms will oftentimes have suggested search and things like that. And those suggested search suggestions can be incredibly offensive, such as this one, which is entitled "Women Think They Are in Charge." And this was actually on a video that I posted about violence against women, and is far from the most shocking typical suggested search under my videos. Another common one is women being humiliated. And so after they've emotionally manipulated young men, they also then normalize this content by suggesting that they re-engage. And this strategy is really effective in making people think that whatever it is that's being suggested is a mainstream discussion and that it's not a niche discussion. And so they think, okay, well, if this social media platform is suggesting it, then I must not be alone in this. And this is something that I can say with my full chest and maybe even start to proliferate to others and harass women, which, you know, this definitely results in increased harassment even on my own content personally. So altogether, intentional platform choices plus algorithmic models that lack contextual awareness incentivize and normalize misogynistic content. By contrast, Communia provides emotional safety by design with our existing consumer social networking app specifically designed for women and non-binary people as a safe space away from the harassment and abuse they experience on mainstream platforms. And now with the emotional safety algorithm we've been building. I will say, and I'm proud to say this, Communia does not struggle with the extremist pipeline. However, all of the emotional health aspects that we've been building have serious intervention potential on larger platforms. And so we really hope to collaborate with other platforms and communities of all sizes as we launch the algorithm this year. As a short overview, the algorithm is a community-informed recommendation system designed to promote emotional well-being instead of take away from it, to reduce manipulation and interrupt toxic content patterns. Unlike engagement-maximizing models, it prioritizes psychological safety, inclusivity, and authentic as well as diverse expression. And a huge part of what makes our algorithm different, even though really this shouldn't be so unique, is that we take a bottom-up approach. It's community-centric, and we involve our users from day one of the process with strategies like labeling workshops and co-design sessions, as well as a reliable annotation platform to incorporate Communia users directly into the ML training process. This is effective in a number of ways, but it also particularly helps ensure that when we get to the professional data labeling process, that those professionals are able to focus on what they culturally already naturally understand from their lived experience. We'll also soon be able to include live user feedback on the algorithm within the Communia app, which will also increase individual control and transparency, hopefully creating a system centered on consent, which I think is so important for all of these issues when it comes to the digital world. Meanwhile, most social media algorithms and AI algorithms rely on data farming and inference for less accurate results. A big misnomer about AI algorithms is that it does actually require a significant amount of human intelligence before it can get to an effective automated life cycle. But if you remember nothing else from my presentation, I really want you to remember this idea of circuit breakers. Essentially, what a circuit breaker is when an algorithm will insert a piece of emotionally neutral or uplifting content after they notice that a user is in a downward cycle of extremes and might have looked at the same type of extremist content or emotionally charged content after 11, 20, 30 posts, right? At that point, at that crisis point, we can insert different types of content to try to break that cycle. Honestly, This is not a difficult thing to do. It's very easy, and it really should be the required norm for any social media company. And so particularly for the policymakers tuning in, I really hope to advocate that this is something that we should expect from any social network. I am proud to say that Communia goes far beyond this with our emotional safety algorithm. We're constantly focusing on emotional pacing, as well as spiral detection. And we're not waiting until users get into a crisis. We're constantly looking with this algorithm to be emotionally attuned to our user. And so we're not just looking at content, we're looking at the actual human beings. Ultimately, Communia preventatively treats the extremism pipeline as an emotional safety problem before it's a content moderation one. Lastly, I wanted to give you a visual example of what a Communia user's algorithm might be comprised of. As you can see, the pie has a lot of slices, and I think that any responsible algorithm is balancing a number of different components, right? For us, we're unique, and we also are giving our users control over how high each slice of the pie is in priority for them. And in contrast, a typical algorithm today on a mainstream social media platform really only has two slices to the pie. The first one is, how many people are you following? Maybe you'll see content from those people, but maybe you won't, in favor of content that the algorithm thinks will keep you on the platform the longest, emotionally charged content, everything that we've, talked about before in this presentation. And all of this balance, again, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, is made possible by the highly contextualized data that we're unique to have, specifically because of our participatory process. So not only is involving users the right thing to do, it's also good business. What you see on the screen now are my 5 C's of digital emotional safety. They're not just company values, they're key design principles of our algorithmic architecture. And I really just want to end this by saying it's not that hard to create solutions for social networks and algorithms that are not horribly impactful to society. And it really just requires a level of intention on the part of social media platforms and maybe some prioritization of at least a few, if not ideally all, of the 5 C's of digital emotional safety. Thank you so much. And I'm really excited to prove out our algorithm and that you can have emotional safe communities that are also thriving social networks in 2026.
Outstanding. I'm excited to hear how the new algorithm rollout goes. It's a really wonderful process, and I think a very, very different non-hegemonic way to tech development. So, Olivia, thank you so much for that wonderful, wonderful presentation. Folks, we're going to come into an open discussion period. So if there are questions from the floor, it is a good moment for our 117 participants to drop those in the chat. While we get any of those queued up, Abideen, Sarah, I'd also invite you to come back on video and join us for a bit of a conversational moment. I think we saw 3 very, very different possibilities here. So Olivia designing better tech futures, better algorithms, better spaces, and better design through technology. It's really reminiscent to me of the ability that tech is what we make of it, right? The beauty of new technologies that we can invent and create different futures, not just the one that we've gotten sucked into at the moment. Abideen, you really focus on a lot of offline interventions. How do you improve peer messaging? How do you improve peer support spaces and cultural shift that engage across digital space as well? And Sarah, I think you gave us a really enlightening insight into how the interrelated tendrils of elements of the manosphere move across the world from east to west, from the center to elsewhere, and how those different layers proliferate into each other and bring people into cycles of radicalization. By way of questions, I think first off, I'm always curious if you had one intervention to point that you could design. If there's one thing you could change right now in terms of shifting the pathways into the manosphere, what's the number one intervention that you think folks should be doing? I'll make it in 2 levels, one at a societal level and one at an individual level. What's the one change folks can make today? Abideen, maybe I go to you first, then Sarah, then Olivia. Sorry, Abideen, you're on mute there.
I said, could you please come again on that question, please?
What's the one most effective intervention you think we should be investing in right now to disrupt the manosphere? Let's talk about the personal level and at the societal level.
Yeah, I think it's about the fact that we need to invest heavily from the grassroots in digital safety education, especially for the male child as well. We need to let them see them not just as as ally, but as an integral part of solving this problem. So integrating digital safety education into our curriculum and paying special attention to male students using a bottom-up approach would be a very integral part of it. Education, education, education. Thank you.
Beautiful. Education, especially getting boys earlier. Sarah, over to you.
I think what both Abideen and Olivia have provided are really like two very solid already alternatives or ways of approaching the manosphere. I completely agree that I think there's a responsibility that lies on the feminist movement and women's rights organizations and human rights, digital rights, anyone working within the sphere to kind of take the reasons that men go to the manosphere seriously rather than condemning them or further isolating them, and incorporate those reasons into their organizing, thinking about the political economy, thinking about the precarity, the loneliness that, communities as a collective are experiencing, and putting them at the heart of organizing. I think that's the only way of at least kind of taking space and reclaiming narratives about these things from the manosphere and from any other extremist groups and organizations.
Thanks, Sarah. So making sure we're bringing in those responses to why men and folks like men are seeking out these more toxic spaces, and actually including those needs in our designs for interventions as well. Olivia, what's your top one?
I think everyone has raised such important points. I feel very refreshed being in this room of values aligned individuals. And, just from being in a lot of broader tech rooms, I really just think that we need more social media accountability from governments. I like the way that things are going in that direction. And I think that without policymakers holding social media companies to account, it's going to be really difficult to put Band-Aids on the problem or reactively, try to solve these problems. All of these elements are so important, right? We need multidisciplinary approaches, but we're always going to be fighting an uphill battle. Even a platform like Communia that's, small and niche and trying to provide a safe space, if these large social networks are not held to account. And again, whether or not they like Communia's algorithm, they could be putting things like circuit breakers. They could be really minimizing the extreme harm that they create, even without completely changing their business model.
Thanks, Olivia. I think there's huge amounts that could be done with relatively small changes for harm reduction across tech, and yet we rarely see it. One thing we're working on within Catalyst is kind of a two-track program. One, building civil servants trainings alongside tech leader trainings. So we bring together both tech leaders and designers with civil servants and activists to go through an executive training program to figure out what are the common points of how we can work together to prevent gender-based violence and violent extremism online, recognizing, as you say, like it can be good for business, shockingly. And also it's an imperative. So I'm excited to see, hopefully, that narrative shifting. We have a couple questions in the chat I think I'll turn to here. From Gabe, what are the biggest barriers you're facing right now, or what resources do you wish you had access to? Sarah, I might go to you first on that one. Barriers and resources.
Oh, I thought this was for the specific project that was mentioned. I would, for me, I'm a researcher, so what I'm doing at the moment is doing qualitative research and specific to understand the narratives and some of the findings were in the report, but my next phase is thinking about funding and how the money moves. Especially that we have a lot of examples in Swana, for example, of some extremist groups and red pillars or misogynist groups that are funded by individuals, bankers, finance people, politicians who are also very intimately or strongly connected and work very closely with other politicians and other groups in the far right or from extremist groups in other countries in Europe and the US. So there's this, global network of money moving around that finances a lot of this work that is important to uncover and understand. So that's one thing. Another thing that I think I would face personally due to my gender is I would love to have the opportunity to do, studies interviews directly with people who consume red pill content in specific, which I think would be slightly difficult and challenging for me to do without, having a lot of bias from the interviewee in this case. But at the moment, for at least research wise, it's just some challenges in terms of pathways of connecting with the material and the people engaged in the community, I would say.
Absolutely. Research challenges. How do we bridge communities and access points, especially when we're talking about really, really sensitive topics? And Abideen, I saw you got back to that question in the chat. Thank you for that. I may move on to another question just so we have time to get through a few others here. We have another one from Marika asking after Olivia. We see tech companies also arguing that safety is costly for business. I mean, we did some studies with EGRN a few years ago showing that, in partnering with Nielsen, that something like 30% of female gamers or folks who identify as being femme have stopped playing a game because of the harassment and kind of targeting they're perceived in there. What are the other types of evidence that you use when you're trying to convince that this can also be good for business when we're approaching safety by design?
I love this question. And if I don't answer it as thoroughly as we want, I'm always happy to connect with people offline or on LinkedIn. Please feel free to reach out. I love talking to people about this. Communia is very research led. And so we've done 2 large scale studies. I think that one of the most notable numbers is that 75% of women have taken some sort of significant step away from social media platforms, specifically due to social media and well-being concerns, whether that's completely deplatforming, I believe that's 40% of it, or spending significantly less time. There's just so much data. I mean, and I will also say on the business side of things, if you're a founder and you're telling a potential funder that your business plan is paid ads on social media, even the people who are driving this engagement at all costs model, they themselves know that this is a diminishing returns at this point because the trust system on social media is so ruined, and consumers are smart enough where they're not clicking on ads anymore. So they're not even participating in it. And I really do feel that there is a world in which, the metas of the world, if they don't adjust, could even one day go out of business. I know that sounds crazy to say, but people thought I was crazy when I created an alternative social network. And now people really understand the mission. So if they don't get on board, they could easily be left behind because there are other emerging platforms, other emerging practitioners who are offering solutions that everyone is looking for.
Thanks, Olivia. I think we're in this incredible moment right now where there are a lot of our large hegemonic companies that people are really fed up with, are deplatforming, are abandoning, and that creates this incredible moment of opportunity. At the same time that with AI tools, I think vibe coding is a bit of a slur, right? You can make incredible software that is bespoke to your niche, whether that's your own word processor or your own social network. Even if you want to invest a bit of time, I think we're on this cusp of incredible new types of digital futures that are made by people and not by massive, massive organizations. And that potential democratization will get huge pushback, but I think there's such potential inside of that. And I'm glad you're part of that move. Folks, if we have other questions, again, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll keep picking on our panelists. I'm also curious for Sarah and Abideen in particular, what are the things that you often see as being as missing in global conversations around TFGBV, around the Manosphere, what are the things that you think are either the people you think aren't there who need to be there, or just the elements of conversation that you see that just really frustrate you, frankly? What are the things that people are getting wrong right now in the space? I'm going off script. I'm sorry.
Sarah, do you want to go?
Sure. I would say what I mentioned, what I had already kind of mentioned briefly is, and what also the other panelists have mentioned, which is the go-to usually in terms of a response to a lot of the content and the stuff that comes out in the Manosphere is a condemnation and an isolation. And I understand that, I understand why some would do it, being fed up with also very structural and real misogyny. But I think people underestimate how easy to get sucked into these loops, and how forceful and aggressive and invasive the Manosphere can be, and how a lot of the content on these in this sphere at least can be. It's a very aggressive process. It really swarms you, and it really changes your life. And I go on some of the forums for people who think of themselves as ex-red pillars, or people who are trying to get out of this loop and this cycle of hate and violence. And it's very interesting, but also very sad seeing how much of a struggle it is, because the discourses and the influencers within these spaces do really speak about, real issues and real struggles in terms of community and purpose and sense of belonging and loneliness, etc. How they frame it is obviously the problem, and where they take you with that framing and what they end up selling you, and how that kind of, the game of blame that ends up taking place is a real problem, and is a real, kind of extremist pathway that can take a lot of men to a very dark place. But where people start, it's usually an unintentional falling down this kind of hole. And I think that's very important to understand, that there are ways that we can get people out of this hole, and there's obviously a very real scream for help that a lot of young men are going through, that takes them to that place in the first place. So I would say it's underestimated how aggressive it really is.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, in addendum to that, I could agree with Sarah, absolutely. And you will notice as well, while I was doing my presentation, condemnation might not really work. It's to dialogue, it's to engage, it's to, train, it's to make them see reason why, this needs to work. That's the only way to which, issues around Manosphere could be solved. And as well, peculiarity and cultural stereotype is extremely important in doing anything. There's a need for us to localize. What is working for you in the US or in the UK or in Canada might not work when you bring it to Africa. We've got to pay careful attention to the culture. Then you've got to look at who are the gatekeepers, who are the influencers that you could engage to train others. Because you know that the moment you capture the influencers, you will in turn be able to influence others with their speech. For example, in this part of the world, whatever our pastors and imam tells us is what we hold by. Whatever our traditional ruler, who is the king, who is the number one in that community, says, is what we hold by. So that's why politicians lobby these critical stakeholders to get things done. And that's the strategies that our HerSafeSpace have adopted as well, to see who are the power breaker, who are the power maker. We do a map of the analysis of them. Then what's the barrier to entry? What exactly do they want to listen to, and how can we get it across to them? So I think that's a strategy we have been working here. We have been using here, and I feel it's work. And I quite agree with Maria as well in the chat box. We need another social contract. No doubt about that. Thank you so much, Galen.
Perfect. I think we're just about at time, so I think that's a great note to end on. I will
just make a quick reflection across all of our wonderful speakers. I think we've seen, the spectrum of the pipeline from where elements of the manosphere coalesce, how they interact globally, what we can do to intervene now, whether that's, through showing better futures, replacing, not condemning, localizing those to the context that we're operating inside of, and hopefully in the future, forging a better social contract, better apps, better AI algorithms that you're creating today, Olivia. So thank you all so much. I'll make a shameless plug that at the Christchurch call, we're also in the process of organizing a global policy dialogue, looking at the intersection between technologically facilitated gender-based violence and violent extremism. That'll be an intensive process for the next 8 months. If you're interested in joining along that process or the forum, we'd love to have you engaged. And hopefully together we can create a bit of a safer, more thriving future, both online and off. Thank you all so much. And Victoria and Ahita, thank you so much for hosting, and to the wider UNFPA team. Have a great rest of your days, everyone.
Thank you, Galen. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Galen. Thank you, Olivia, Abideen, and Tara for this wonderful session. Because we are slightly over time, we will not be having another break. However, I want to encourage you all after the LEAP session and throughout the next 30 days to log back onto the platform, explore the books, the resource library, and input into the TFGBV mapping exercise available at the TFGBV mapping works. Another kindly reminder, we are discussing sensitive content. Your comfort comes first, so please take breaks or adjust your volume as needed to care for yourself.